My name is Tony McGarren. I'm CEO and founder of People Playbook. Today, we're here in Barcelona, kicking off the first part of our three-part series called Conversations with High Performers, in collaboration with our wonderful client, TravelPerk, where we're supporting the high-performance population in their organization to essentially elevate their skills even further for even greater performance. The reason that we chose Bret Freeman as our first guest in this series was because his area of expertise is in neuroscience. Understanding how our brains work is absolutely the first and most important step to becoming a high performer. And what we wanted to do with Bret was to make it accessible for everyone, remove the complexity and the technical, and make it real for these high performers so that they actually could take away actionable insights. And so that's what we aim to do in this particular event.
Hi, I'm Bret Freeman. I'm a business psychologist. I specialize in applied neuroscience. So we're here at TravelPerk in Barcelona today, and we're having conversations with high performers. So I really look at how we can work with our brains instead of against our brains, and how we can get the most for ourselves and our teams. So I think a lot of leaders today tend to make lots of assumptions, right? Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but oftentimes leaders look at their teams and they're expecting their teams to do things exactly the same way that they themselves would do them. When in fact, we all have different experiences. We all have different connections in our brain. We have different things that excite us and maybe don't excite us. And so as a leader looking at what's brain friendly about leadership, it's helping to leverage those strengths for everyone, helping people to really kind of lean into kind of what's already naturally in their brain and using those strengths to continue their own performance. Yeah, really looking forward to this conversation with Tony here at TravelPerk. And, you know, what a privilege to be in front of a group of high performers talking about something I love. So really, really looking forward to this particular event.
No, I'm delighted to invite Bret Freeman to the stage. He is also part of our organization as a playmaker, so does a lot of delivery. Some of you may have met him previously. He was delivering on the Crucial Conversations program that we run here for your people leaders. And Bret, it's just such a pleasure because every time you and I have conversations, I come away myself with new ways of optimizing my brain to be effective, right? And I think, you know, when you're at a level where you're aiming to go above and beyond, to be a high performer, that's absolutely critical. Let me start. We asked everyone here about high performance, and I want to ask you, you know, what does high performance mean to you, Bret?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. First of all, hi. Thanks for having me today. Really looking forward to this conversation. And Tony, always a pleasure when I get to sit on the other side of the aisle from you and have a conversation. So thanks for that as well. Yeah, so what does high performance mean to me? I think, you know, I kind of live and work in a space where psychology is about how our past events might shape our behavior, right? We've had experiences, those experiences impact us in a way and they make us behave in a certain way when we're exposed to certain stimuli. Neuroscience is about those kind of electrical and chemical impulses in our brains. Where those two things intersect is really interesting. High performance for me is when you can get a handle on that and you can figure out, hey, here is how to work with my best brain in order to accomplish the things I'm looking to accomplish, rather than working against my brain, which many of us unintentionally do a lot.
It's about understanding our brain and about helping, and I just love the science part of this, and I always find it fascinating. Let's define for everyone, what do we mean by neuroscience? Because it's somewhat of a buzzword, right? It gets thrown around. Neuroscience, really important. And oftentimes I think it's probably misunderstood. So what's your definition?
Yeah. And I think neuroscience has become really trendy these days, right? Everybody wants to put neuroscience into everything. I've been working in this space for a really long time when it didn't used to be so trendy. And along with that comes, you know, some what we call kind of neural myths as well. Really, when I'm referring to neuroscience, I'm talking about how do those electrical and chemical impulses in our brain affect what we do, right? How is the chemical balance in our brain impacting our performance? How is it impacting the way we interact with one another? How is it impacting the way we show up every day.
Okay, I love that. Are we all on board about neuroscience? I hope we are. Yes? Okay, cool. We've Q&A coming up, so feel free to get them in. But we've talked about high performance and what it means to you. We've talked about just there now, like defining neuroscience, excuse me. Tell me, why is it important to you? Because we were just chatting at lunch, you've had a scenic route to this part of your career, and now you spend your time really advocating for this space. And I'm curious, like, why is it so important to you? Why do you care about it personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think the world needs change. I mean, quite frankly, right? We need change from top to bottom in our organizations, in our personal life, everywhere. The thing that excites me about what I do for a living is I get to interact with people like you every day. How cool is my job, right? And I get to learn from each of you. What's working for you? What's helping you with your performance? And hopefully, as a result of our interaction, there's growth for both of us. And oftentimes I'm fortunate enough to experience that growth for me, certainly, but also be a small part of your journey in whatever direction you happen to be traveling in. So yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about for me more than anything else.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm excited about the kind of real small nuggets and actionable insights that you all can take away immediately. Cause I kind of lean on the give me the best stuff right away, which is why it's called 3 points and not 10 points. Just give me the 3 top things that are going to help me immediately be more effective, perform better, and ultimately live happier, healthier, more productive life. And I love we were just chatting about this too, Bret, that you're really into that transformation, right? And how do you expand on that journey, which is one of the things I love about working with Travel Perk. You have different opportunities to develop, and across this series, I think is as an example of that. So let's kick it off then. Let's get into your first point, which always surprises me because I don't think it's what I was taught in high school science, but apparently our brains are all unique.
Yes, absolutely. No two brains are alike. We all have different experiences. Those experiences form our neural networks, our connections in our brain. So our brains are all wired differently. Everybody has a different perspective, right? And how that translates into leadership or into performance is we need to understand that everybody in my universe, everybody in my orbit, so to speak, also has different connections. You approach leadership in a different way than I approach leadership. Neither one's better or worse than the other. You approach it according to the way your brain's connected. I approach it the way my brain's connected. If I tried to make you do things the way that I want them done, I might not get the best result.
You will face a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the key, right? So understanding that we do all have different perspectives. We all have different experiences. What that means is that sometimes my advice might not be the right advice for you because you might have a different way to solve that problem. Sometimes your advice might not be the best advice for me because I might have a different way to solve that problem. And like I said, neither one of those ways are right or wrong. But if I'm trying to get the best out of people, the worst thing that I can do is try to create a bunch of little me's because our brains are different.
So for me, it sounds like the starting point is an acceptance of that, right? And that's the first thing, right? I accept we're all different. We've all got different brains. And then there's the real life application of what you just described, right? When you and I sit in a room, which we do often when we're designing and preparing to do our best work, and we face conflict, how might, these high performers and other high performers be more effective in navigating the conflict with other types of brains?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So the thing is, we enter into a conversation if we have conflict. Oftentimes, my agenda in that conversation is to prove to you why you're wrong. Your agenda in that conversation is to prove to me why I'm wrong. And we wonder why we don't come to resolution. Right? I think, and I'll just use us as an example if that's okay. I think
it depends how personal it's going to be.
I think when you and I enter into a conversation and we have conflict, we both enter into that conversation with the agenda of finding the best way forward. Might be your way, might be my way, might be a combination of the two. It doesn't matter. Let's find the best way, right? As high performers, that kind of has to be baked in because otherwise we spend our whole life in conflict. Otherwise we spend our whole life focused on the things we don't want to do, or the reasons why that's a bad idea, or the reasons why this isn't really going to work, rather than, hey, let's find a way forward together.
Yeah. I love that you've called that out, that we start with, and I suspect a lot of folks in this room and listening now and join us on the live stream have got to this position because they're purpose driven, not ego driven. And they're focused on, okay, what are we trying to achieve? And then working towards that goal, whether they're in the builders or in the sales org here in Travel Park. So they face conflict. It makes sense. You kind of realign then around what's the objective and what's the goal. And then you figure out a hybrid.
Absolutely. Yeah. And alignment, I work with a lot of teams across the world. And I would say 9.5 times out of 10, when there is a team that's not performing well, it's because there's misalignment. It's because they haven't all either signed up to the same goal, or there are several different agendas within the team, and they're not all moving in the same direction. And part of that is because, well, subconsciously, I think that my brain's connections are better than your brain's connections, so we should do it my way. And you think your brain's connections are better than my brain's connections, so we should do it your way. And neither one of us is kind of willing to move forward or focus on a common goal or find some commonality between us that we can work with.
And the special ingredient for that is empathy, right? Is it empathy? Is it understanding that, is it trying to understand someone else's perspective first?
Yeah. So empathy, again, another sort of, I think, trendy word in leadership these days, right? Empathy. How many have been on an empathy class? You don't have to answer that, but, right? The thing about empathy is not so much me trying to understand your position, right? Oftentimes we think, oh, if you want to be empathetic, you got to figure out what it'd be like to be in somebody else's shoes. I think real empathy goes a step deeper than that. Considering no two brains are alike, empathy is understanding how you react in your situation. Because if all I'm doing is imagining how I would act in your shoes, I'm trying to imagine how my brain would work in that situation, which is probably not the right thing, right? So what's your reaction? We talked about this earlier, is, when you have a discussion with somebody, people are going to focus on different details of that discussion, right? For some people, this thing might be important. For somebody else, this other aspect might be important. For a third person, maybe this other aspect is important. Empathy is recognizing that all three of those aspects are really valid. All three of those aspects have a reasoning behind it, and working within that.
I'm still curious to hear other ways that we can take the insight of our brains are all unique and then apply that to how we work with one another. So I'm curious about that. And as I use the word curious, I was sitting here thinking about some of the other work we're doing in this space around coaching and your focus on curiosity. Get curious. And I find that in my experience, the more curious I am, the more I avoid the judgment. And therefore I'm accepting through curiosity that my brain is very different to everyone else's here. Are there any other things that you would add?
Yeah, and curiosity is a great word, right? I think curiosity is the opposite of ego, right? Curiosity is tell me more. What's going on with you? How can I understand that? How can I recognize what your lived experience might be, right? That's really key. And when it comes to the concept of no two brains alike, and if we're in coaching conversations, what that means is if I'm in a coaching conversation with you, I'm not going to give you a lot of advice, because my advice probably is not the right thing for you. But what I want to do is I want to help you to expand your thinking in whatever direction you need to expand it, to have whatever insight or make whatever connection you need to make. And I say you need to make because a lot of times in coaching conversations, I see people saying, "Oh, I know exactly what you need. You need, yeah, okay. So what question can I ask you to move you in that direction?" That's still my work. That's not your work, right? So understanding no two brains are alike means that your solution may be very different. I mean, if I asked everybody in this room, very quickly, let's make a list. Everything you have to do tomorrow, make a list. And I gave you a couple minutes to do that. And I said, right, how's your list organized? Some people might say, oh, well, I just did a brain dump, got everything out on the page. Somebody else might say, oh, I organized, hardest stuff to easiest stuff. Somebody else might say, I organized easiest stuff to hardest stuff. Somebody else might say, I did it according to time boxes. I did it according to whatever came to my head first. None of those lists are wrong, right? If you're making a priority list and I don't happen to work with priorities, that might be wrong for me. It's not wrong for you. Somebody might say, yeah, I don't like lists. That's all right too. So I think that's really the key.
Yeah. I just love, like, again, when I hear it, it sounds so obvious, right? That you're not trying to sell people on your brain, and instead you're understanding that they're different, and then almost do not try and pass that threshold because it's ineffective, which I love. All right, we've explored point one. I want to get into your second point now, uh, which is probably my favorite of your 3 points because I'm a basketball player, and yes, an Irish basketball player. There aren't many of us, but there's a few. And it hasn't happened too often in my career, but it has happened at my level where I've got into the zone. And I've had this experience where I'm playing really well and I am scoring baskets. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just in this flow state, and it's like everything I throw up is going to go in, and I'm totally locked in. And it's euphoric. Those of us that have been in the zone, whether in work or sport, we know what it's like to feel like we're in the zone. And so you're going to tell us a little bit about what that means from a neuroscience and a high performance perspective, Bret.
Yeah. So when we think about our brain and our brain's performance, how many people are morning people, early mornings? How many people are afternoon people? Yeah. Evening people, right? So our brains, we have certain times. I happen to be a really early morning person, right? I love early mornings. My brain is at my best from about 5 a.m. until about 11 or 11:30. Then I know I hit a little bit of a slump. I know I come back online about 2 o'clock, right? I know that about my brain. So for me, getting in the zone is recognizing when my brain is at its optimal and organizing the tasks or the things that I have to do according to that rhythm. So what that means is I don't wake up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, sit down on my desk, and then clear out my spam email folder. Because that doesn't take a whole lot of cognitive effort to do. That would be a waste of my cognitive energy to do that, right? So what I do in the mornings is, if I get up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, sit down on my desk, and I do the heavy lifting. If I'm designing a program, if I'm doing some research, if I'm doing something, that's my morning activities. At 11:30 or so, when I know my brain's fading, that's when I'm going to clean out my junk email. Because it doesn't take a whole lot of thought to do that. When my brain comes back online later in the afternoon, I'm going to pick up some more heavy lifting tasks. If we can understand how our brains work, and all you have to do is just keep a little diary. Just for the next week, just note, when are you mentally at your best? Find the rhythm, and then organize your days according to that rhythm. If you've got a really important meeting with somebody, try to organize that to the best of your ability when your brain's at its best. Because who wants to go into a meeting when my brain's kind of half on? And yeah, I've got a really important meeting with my boss, or meeting with potential client, or meeting with whatever, and I'm not bringing my best brain in. That's not a great idea, right?
I like the intentionality about what you said, because oftentimes I think, especially in organizations, when we report to somebody, we're usually at the behest of their optimizing of their brain, right? Of them getting in the zone. And I find I think on our team, Aaron and I talk about needs clash. Right? If you're an evening person and I'm a morning person, we're meeting in the afternoon now. How do we manage that? So I love the intentionality of, like, yeah, trying to put yourself in the best position to get into the zone. What else comes to mind for you, Bret, with around getting in the zone?
I mean, you can't always, everybody's not always going to conform to your schedule, right? I mean, let's face it, right? Sometimes there's compromises. Sometimes there's finding the best way. The other things to think about are, our basic stuff, our nutrition, right? Our hydration, right? As little as a 2% decrease in overall hydration of your brain can impact your cognitive abilities by as much as 20%, right? So have that glass of water next to your desk all day, anytime you're doing anything, because dehydration is bad for us, man, right? Not taking breaks.
Quickly grabs glass of water.
Yeah. Not taking breaks is bad for us, right? Schedule 50-minute meetings instead of hour meetings, right? Is that last 10 minutes really required to be productive? The payoff for taking that last 10 minutes between your next meeting is going to be much greater than kind of pushing through and not having the break. because you just spend the first 5 minutes of your next meeting trying to catch up on the last meeting anyway, right? And we've got into really bad habits, right? Thanks, COVID. We've got into really bad habits because we go from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting, and there's no break in between. Right? So again, intentionally build those breaks in, build that nutrition in, organize according to your own brain's rhythm, whatever that happens to be, and recognizing that if you have to have a heavy conversation with somebody, those of you that may be managers, and you've got to have a heavy conversation with one of your direct reports, maybe a performance conversation or whatever, consider when they're going to bring their best brain into that conversation and maybe work to their schedule at that time. Gosh, we've got to have this conversation. What would be the best time for you? Tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon? What do you think? What's best for you? Yeah. Then make that call. And I promise those discussions, when they have to happen, will be far more engaging.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? I remember you just talking about like when your brain's ready. And I think this is what we're talking about, because again, high performance, if I'm leading people or I'm leading myself in being a great performer, I have to optimize for my brain. We're going to get into that in a moment. But I once had feedback given to me at 4:30 on a Friday while I was holding a beer from my manager. And it caught me off guard. It was like, I didn't even see it coming. And it ruined my entire weekend, actually, because I was not in the right place.
Yeah. And then you dwell on it, right?
Oh, the whole weekend was ruined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you think, oh, great.
So I love the intentionality of doing that. I also love the glass of water piece, because I don't drink enough water. And I will just feel like, and I think a good hack is just having a large glass.
Water with coffee in it doesn't count.
Yeah, that's right. But I see people with these massive jugs of water. Stanley cups are pretty trendy right now, aren't they? So, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's about getting in the zone. I love the intentionality piece there around, working on a routine that works for you to give your best to get in the zone. Your third point is somewhat of an extension of that, but perhaps the most meaningful piece is around making kind of your work and life brain friendly.
Yeah. So remove friction anywhere you can. Right. When we talk about removing friction, so there's a concept in neuroscience called fluency. Right. Fluency is when something's easily digestible for you. So for instance, if I made a PowerPoint and my PowerPoint had, 100 words on it, and those words were all in different fonts, you're going to look at that and you're going to go, huh? And it's going to take your brain some time to figure that out. Whereas if I had a PowerPoint with a couple of words on it, there's no friction there for you, right? Think about this in terms of habits, right? So if you want to stop snacking in front of the television, the easiest way to do that is to stop putting snacks in your house, right? Because then if you really want a snack, you got to get in the car and go to the shops and buy one and come back, and there's friction there. Right. My favorite example of this is Netflix, right? How many binge Netflix? Yeah. One episode after the other, right? So the CEO of Netflix was asked at a conference one time, so who's your biggest competition? He said, sleep.
Oh my God.
So what we did is we created a feature on Netflix that's just the autoplay the next episode. So our consumers, they don't have to get up off the couch and go turn the channel. They don't even have to look for the remote. It just plays. We've removed all the friction. And now what happens is, how many times have you binge watched something and you think, oh, I've got to be at work in an hour and a half. And you've been up all night because they've removed friction, right? You can do that in our life as well. You can do that in your communication with others, right? I always think about in my communication, is the thing that I'm about to say going to be easily understandable for the person on the other side of the conversation? If not, how can I rephrase? If not, how can I remove that friction?
Just thinking about Netflix, to be honest. Although I'm watching Yellowstone at the moment, which has been fantastic. And yeah, we were discussing this, like, that next episode, just 5 more minutes, or The Last of Us. Anyway, yes, absolutely. What a feature. Thanks so much, Netflix, for ruining our sleep, which is not at all important for high performance.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, we can have a whole nother session on sleep.
Well, let's not talk too much about sleep, because I think it's pretty, I think we all know, critical. I love that we talked about water. We talked about sleep. I like the communication piece, right? Because I find in this sector that many of you are working in, again, whether you're in the builders or otherwise in Travel Perk, you're doing a lot of communication. And it comes back to actually your first point, Brett, because I think oftentimes people are communicating what they want to say rather than thinking about what's the outcome that they want or what they want the other person to hear.
100%. 100%. Right. Have you ever been in a conversation or even a business meeting, and you come away from that conversation or meeting, and then maybe a day later you meet up with somebody who was in the same conversation and you start talking about it and they got a totally different message out of it? And you think, were you in the same meeting I was? Right. So when it comes to making it brain friendly, when it comes to making our work environments brain friendly, for instance, right? What's your workspace like? And this is a great space. Lots of natural light, right? Great place to take a break if you need to. If you can take that 10 minutes and get up and have a walk around the building. If you're working from home, right? What does your home environment look like? How do we remove that friction in everything we do? We were talking about travel because I travel a lot. I'm not particularly fussy about the hotel that I stay in. I'm not particularly fussy about the airline I fly or any of that. I am particularly fussy about what removes friction, because I don't want to have to think about it. Because anytime I have to think about something, it's taking my cognitive effort to think about that thing, right? So if I can remove it, and you see this in some of the Silicon Valley CEOs, right? They always wear the same thing: black t-shirt, black trouser, black t-shirt, black trouser, because that's one less thing I have to think about in the morning. I don't have to get up, open my wardrobe, and think, what am I going to wear today? That's friction, right? So where can you remove friction in your daily routine, in the things that you do, in your communication with others, right? I know you're going to cover this later, but the thing about our brains is our brains are always looking for things that are out of the ordinary, things that are threatening to us. When we find something that's threatening, we try to move away from it. Threat is friction, right? If I, on a Friday afternoon, we're at a pub and you've got a beer in your hand, I say, yeah, let me give you some feedback. All of a sudden your brain is thinking, how can I get out of this conversation? How can I get away from Brett? How can I stop this? It's Friday, I got a beer. I don't want to be in this conversation. You're not going to take in anything I say anyway, because I've just introduced a whole bunch of friction. Think about when you send meeting invitations to your colleagues. I never send a meeting invitation without at least a draft agenda, without giving somebody a bit of a heads up what I want to talk about. Because otherwise, it's uncertainty, it's threat. What do they want to talk about? What's going on? Right? My wife and I have this game that we play because at our house, her office is in the house, my office is in the garden. And we communicate a lot of the time by text during the day. And she used to send me a text that would say, can you call me, please? And I might be in the middle of something. Yeah, I heard something go, It would freak me. Oh, is it important? What's going on? Do I need? And a large part of my brain would be now all of a sudden dedicated to what her need might be and less focused on the thing I was doing. So now a text might come on my phone. I might be in the middle of something. It says, can you call me, please? Not important, not urgent. Great. Now I know I can get to you when I get to you. You've removed the friction for me. Thank you very much. If it's important, she'll say, can you call me? It's urgent. Great. Now I know it's urgent. And I can, if I'm in the middle of a meeting, I can say, hey, I've got to call you back, or I've got to whatever, right? Think about that for your colleagues, for your customers. Where are you removing friction, and where are you unintentionally, because oftentimes it is unintentional, adding friction? It'll change your life, I promise.
The bit around certainty and clarity, we just talked about this also on the walk from lunch, about sometimes it's like a treasure hunt, trying to read somebody's email. What do they actually need or want? And oftentimes it is tied up. And I say this to TK because I see this with organizations that are very people focused. You're trying to be nice, but you're not being kind. Right? So nice is like, I'm trying to be nice, but I'm not being kind. Clear is kind, kind is clear, So actually saying the direct thing in one sentence rather than a full paragraph actually is the kind thing to do and more effective ultimately for the brain.
Yeah, and I think one piece that's really key to that, and I've said this 2,000 times, it's connection before communication, right? I can be kind to you as long as we have a human connection. If we don't have a human connection, and I say something to you that may be straight to the point, you might think, well, who the heck are you to tell me that? Or, we're going to miscommunicate because we're not connected first, right? So the people aspect is, are we connected on a human level? Then effective communication can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I love it because you and I talk about connection all the time in our work, in our space. And then when you do the connection at the start, it creates that safe space as well. Doesn't that reward? Oh, okay, I'm safe. I don't have to worry. There's no threat here, which I like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it comes back to, do you have an agreement with everybody that you work with on a day-to-day basis, positive intent? You and I have a positive intent agreement. You can say whatever you want to me. I can say whatever I want to you. And we know we take it in the spirit that it's intended. Great. Thanks for that. Right?
Yeah.
And if we don't have that connection first, it's going to fall flat.
Okay. We could talk forever, but I'm thinking again back to the brain and the breaks and the hydration. So Bret, thank you so much. We have talked about your first point. Our brains are all unique, right? Every brain is different. Then we got into the concept of getting in the zone and how we can successfully do that. And then lastly, just now we talked about sort of making work brain friendly. And I'm excited about how this is hopefully going to have a ripple effect on all of our high performers here and joining us on the live stream. My final question for you folks, to give you all some certainty, snacks are coming. How might the world change if we were to adopt all of the things you've just shared with us?
Imagine, and particularly in today's global stage, imagine a world where you could have certainty tomorrow about what was going to happen. How much more comfortable would you be in everything that you do? You have that opportunity here as an organization to be intentionally certain about things that you do, to intentionally send reward signals to everybody that you work with. And I think above and beyond all, if everyone considered the brain on the other side of the exchange more than they considered their own, the world would be a whole different place.
That sounds like a fun place to live. Folks, thank you so much to Bret Freeman for joining us. The Conversations with High Performers 3-Point Podcast. Give him a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone.